The days are longer, the calendar is filling up, and I want to feel as good as this beautiful summer weather. That's why I've been loving Groons. It's one daily pack of gummies that covers my greens, vitamins, and minerals, and even has 6 grams of prebiotic fiber. So I don't need to juggle a complicated wellness routine on top of everything else. They taste amazing. They're easy to toss in my bag on the go. Plus, they're vegan, gluten free, and HSA, FSA eligible for reimbursement. Save up to 52% off with promo code podcast at gruns.co. That's code podcast at gruns.co.
We hear questions like these all the time. Can TSR Injury Law help me if I'm hurt on a motorcycle? Yeah. How about if I'm hurt on a boat? Yes. It's simple. If you've been injured, it's TSR time. Call us today for a free consultation at 612-TSR-TIME.
It's the Go Gopher podcast with Mike Grimm, episode number 8. I am Mike Grimm, voice for the Golden Gophers, and welcome back to our podcast. We're going to talk Golden Gopher basketball in the Go Gopher podcast in this episode. That includes analysis of new Gopher men's coach Ben Johnson's first year, the outlook recruiting-wise for the men's team, and a breakdown of the Big Ten. Ryan James is the national recruiting analyst for Prep Hoops and Gopher Illustrated publisher. He'll be my guest in a moment. Our Go Gopher podcast is presented by our great friends at Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're a business founder planning to exit your business, start by contacting Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. Sunbelt serves more businesses up to $5 million in revenue than anyone, and True North M&A serves companies with revenues up to $150 million. Get a confidential, no-cost, no-obligation business valuation started today. Make the most from your life's work. Visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com today. Our podcast is also sponsored by State Farm agent Tony Hoagland at ChamplinInsurance.com. As always, our thanks to Tony and Champlin Insurance. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast. You can also go back and listen to other Go Gopher podcasts. Last week, for example, we had the legendary Polish Eagle Dick Jankowski on, and we have 2 podcasts this week. Our other one focuses on Gopher hockey, so look up that one as well. It's absolutely free for you to subscribe and free to listen at any time. This episode, it's Gopher basketball with Ryan James after this.
Hey Gopher fans, this is your State Farm agent Tony Hoagland. We are super excited to be part of the new Mike Grimm Show on Talk North. For the year of 2022, we will be donating $10 to the University of Minnesota Children's Masonics Hospital for everyone that calls our office or checks in with us online and mentions that they heard about us on Talk North and the Mike Grimm Show. We are really excited again that Mike came on board with Talk North. You can reach us at 763-421-4900. You can find us on the web at ChamplainInsurance.com. Again, 763-421-4900, or find us on the web at ChamplainInsurance.com. Row the boat, Sky Yuma, go Gophers.
We're going to talk some Golden Gopher basketball now. Ryan James is with us. He's the national recruiting analyst for Prep Hoops and Gopher Illustrated publisher, and we always see him at the barn. And good to see you, Ryan.
Good to see you as well, Mike. It's exciting. I'm excited to be here and talk some Gopher basketball after an interesting season.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us here on the podcast. Let's talk about this basketball season. It's been quite an interesting last 12 months. When you think about 12 months ago, obviously there was some rumblings 12 months to this day, really. This week that the end of the Richard Pitino era might be approaching, and then the coaching search. And I know you were all over that in reporting different candidates and different interviews. And Ben Johnson gets hired, and now here we are. 50, I suppose, weeks later. What is your assessment here, year one of the State of the Union address, so to speak, for this Gopher men's basketball program?
Well, when you said all over it, I'll take that as a nice compliment.
Yes.
But when the name Ben Johnson popped up, there was a little surprise there. My assessment of this season, it's been, I would say, Ben Johnson and his staff have proved to be better coaches and more level-headed leaders in this situation than I think anybody expected. I think the fans are really excited with what they've seen offensively and what they've hoped to accomplish defensively. I think they've been overwhelmed in Big Ten play defensively, and I don't know that we have a full scope of what Ben Johnson, Dave Thorson, Jason Kemp, and Marcus Jenkins want to do defensively because of the lack of depth to really do what they want defensively. But I believe it's been a positive overall, although February is biting the Minnesota Gopher program in the butt once again, but that's nothing new.
Yeah, you're right. It seems these February doldrums hit. It was one time, the 2017 season, where it was a strong February, and the Gophers had their best finish in a number of years that year. Otherwise, February's been a tough month, and it was again here as we're now into the month of March. I thought heading into the year, Ryan, let me throw my thought at you and get your comment on it, that we knew the talent level on the roster was a bit limited. I don't think anyone thought it'd be a tournament team. I thought if everything fell into place, maybe you could get yourself to 500. That's where they are as we record this, one game under 500 with a couple left. But I thought the main goal for Ben Johnson had to be to instill a system, a culture, and I know people don't like that word, but I'm going to use it because I do believe it's an important, invaluable thing with whether you're running Target or whether you're running Federated Insurance or whether you're running a football or basketball program or a high school team or a 10-year-old traveling baseball team. There has to be guidelines with which you want to operate, and that, for lack of a better term, is the culture. So I thought it was important that Ben Johnson, understanding, Gopher fans had to have the understanding they weren't going to go win 25 games. It just wasn't going to happen. So now what's the goal? And I thought the goal had to be set the culture, set the expectation, play in a way in which people would appreciate the way they play basketball, share the ball, defend. As you mentioned, it's been a struggle defensively, but I do think what I've been impressed with is the coaching staff has changed game plans, like, depending on the opponent and specific to opponents. Like against Indiana, they double teamed Trace Jackson Davis, okay? And then against Wisconsin, they single teamed the center. And there was reasons for all of that. And frankly, it worked. It didn't result in wins, but I thought it was an effective game plan. And I think that goal was accomplished, that they have set a tone and a tenor that fans like, that recruits, and I'm going to ask you about that here in a minute, seem to have, at least now they have a picture of what it looks like.
Yes, and if people don't like the word culture, they need to get over themselves, because that's part of modern day work. That's a part of modern day programs of anything you do, and that needs to be said. I don't know that for a while there has been an established culture here. I really don't know that we've had one in 20 years, an established culture. There have been, the word toxic has been used at different times. So I think the number one most important thing was establishing a culture, establishing their brand, establishing what they want to do. And I agree with what you just said. I also agree with the game plan switching. There have been games, I don't remember the game offhand, but they came into a road game and they were winning at half. And I loved their game plan throughout the first half. But unfortunately, they didn't have the stamina and the bodies to sustain that through the second half. I do like the 1-3-1 zone against Northwestern. They still don't know what they're doing against it. And that came almost out of nowhere. So there have been switches like that. Coming into the season, I would say that my thought process was probably a 7-3 non-conference, probably a 4 or 5 win Big Ten. They did better than that non-conference play. In conference play, it's probably going to be just below. It's probably going to be where I expected coming in, although my expectations changed a little bit after the November and December months. I thought maybe they could get to 6-7 wins, but we're seeing the grind kind of pulling them back. But yes, if anybody ever had the expectation of an NCAA tournament, I don't think they fully understand what the depth of this team is. Now, I love Sean Sutherland. He's their 6th man. But a lot of years, he'd probably be their 8th or 9th man. There are starters that in this team that are a top option. Peyton and Jamison Battle are top options. But I just don't know that their third options right now would be a third option on and a good, team that wins an NCAA tournament team. All these guys have battled their tails off. And if one of the guys sitting over on the sidelines, Parker Fox or Isaiah Enan, if one of them hadn't torn their ACL, there might be the depth for more, but at this point, it's just not there. But I think the primary goal was to establish culture, establish who they are as coaches, and I think they have done that.
Yeah, and in Ben's case, you knew him better than I because you went all the way back to when he was a player here. I knew him through his time as Richard Pitino's assistant, and so I would watch him do scouting reports, and he was fine, right? He was fine. So when he got hired, I thought, okay, he's gonna have first year jitters, first year bumps, first year. Oh, well, that's something he'll have to learn, and he's had a few. But I'll tell you what has impressed me the most was how he has taken the job, and record aside, whatever, right? But how he has taken the job and he fits. I mean, and I don't just mean fit. Obviously, he knows the program, but I mean he is playing the part of a head coach. I have some access that others don't, so I'm going to let some people in. When you watch him run a practice, like that's the dude in charge. There's no doubt about it. And quite frankly, it's been a step up from when I was watching him operate in a similar mode as an assistant. And sometimes you just need to have that opportunity to be the lead voice. And he has done that. I guess Spencer and I have talked about this, that we are both been impressed having watched him before and now having watched him as a head coach, the command with which he has handled the job for a relatively young first-time coach in a league that is a killer league to try to out-coach somebody in. So that part has been impressive to me, that just the general command. And I think probably people who knew Ben better than I that go back probably wouldn't be as surprised in the fact that with the command part of it. What do you think?
I agree, and I think what we forgot when he first got this job, I think so many people were focused on Minnesota really wants to get those locals, and that's the only focus. And I think they were so focused on the Minnesota administration being focused on that, and I think too many people were focused on his inexperience. We didn't think about the fact of who Ben Johnson has learned from over in the past. Who has he been under? Dave Thorson, Tim Miles, Ben Jacobson, Travis Steele, Richard Pitino. These are different people of different leadership types. Several of which that I just mentioned, they have command of a practice, but they also had really good culture around them. And I think that's something that people have to remember. Ben Johnson grew up playing for Dave Thorson.
Yeah.
And if you've been around Dave Thorson, you've been around Tim Miles, you've been around Ben Jacobson, you know that culture is very important to these guys, and the command of a practice is important to them. And the first time that there was like a quieter arena, I think it was one of those games against Western Kentucky or Princeton, and you could hear Ben on the sidelines throughout the whole game. I think that is when the fans kind of took a step back and like, oh, wow, this guy does have an authoritative voice. He does have control of everything that's going on out here. And despite the record, and just, I deal with a lot of the fan frustration. I get to answer all these questions on Gopher Illustrated. And their frustration is never towards the coach. As a matter of fact, even the frustrated people are like, hey, Ben Johnson has surprised me. This coaching staff has surprised me. Their frustration comes down to the depth of, the depth and why they have the depth, which dates back to the spring. That's their frustration.
What has surprised you the most, or let me rephrase, what have you liked the most so far, one, and two, what is maybe an area, and I'm going to ask about recruiting because that's a whole different ballgame, but aside from recruiting, what's an area that you think maybe is the spot that is the weak point here that has to get some attention here as we approach the offseason?
It's 100% depth. Like when you see this team hit, a lot of fans don't think about the TV timeouts, although ourselves, we live by them when we look at the clock, right? Like when the Gophers are at that 12 and that 8-minute mark, those points of the game is where they always seem to falter because there's guys on the floor that have been on there extensively, and there's really no one to come in and give them a mental breather, not just a physical breather, a mental breather from what's going on. And that's probably the biggest thing. They just need that depth. And so far it's been addressed. There's going to be continuing to address the spring, and we'll get to that in a second. But that's the biggest thing. They need that depth when it comes to the midpoints when they've been on the court too long, because there's no way to describe it. I can't do it either. I didn't do it. Me running around Coach Hassan's practices in a goofy uniform does not count. Like there's no way to describe how hard it is to curl a guy screens you and another guy screens you, and you have to fight through that and get in position and do it again and again and again. There's no way to describe that to fans having to do that for 6-7 minutes. And when that wears on you, the Gophers don't have people that come in and give guys a break from that. And also, people don't think about the fact that how hard it is to turn a corner with the, when you're attacking in the Big Ten against Big Ten defenders. They don't realize how hard it is to set a screen and come off that screen to get space. Those things wear on players, and it stops happening. And that's when you see guys just being like, "Oh, I get tired," and throw up a jumper. Like those, they have that, the wearing that's on those players. They need depth to take away that wearing, and that's the biggest thing.
Well, and one of the telltale signs of that, and I giggle about it a little bit because I'm not in their shoes, but if you watch during those media timeouts, they're usually 2.5 minutes. And I will say this, Ben and the staff, they're the fastest coaches I've ever seen through that. They won't spend the whole 2 minutes. Like usually, like Indiana the other day, the referee after every timeout had to get in and break that huddle up and say, "Hey, we're ready to play, blow the whistle." The Gophers are done. But Peyton and Curry, while the huddle's done and most of the guys are out walking, they stay seated on the stool until the play is about ready to go, because they're just getting as much time off their legs, even if it's an extra 20 seconds once the huddle is broken. They don't get up. They're staying there, and that tells you, I think, all you need to know about how much they're trying to fight to get as much rest by the second as they can.
Yeah, and those huddles, I do want to point out something branching off of that. Like, I don't mean to pick and pry from the past, but like, it's just nice to see all the guys engaged in the huddle, not having guys walk over here, walk over there. Everybody's engaged, and that's important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we saw a few of stragglers in the past. There's no doubt about that. All right.
Yeah,
well,
there was a few people that, they went away from the pack, from the herd at the time.
Well, I want to talk about recruiting, because really at the end of the day, in this league, and I talked to Fred Hoiberg a little bit when the Gophers played down in that Nebraska game ahead of time. We did an interview for the pregame show, and he talked about one of the things, and I don't want to put words in his mouth. I don't think it surprised him, but he said one of the things that has kind of punched him in the nose is just how hard it is to build a program in the Big Ten, because now you have to look at the standings and say, who am I going to jump? All right, Purdue's where they're at, Illinois where they're at, Indiana's a blue blood that's kind of also trying to fight out, Minnesota's kind of in its spot where they're going to be, Iowa has a nice run going with Fran McCaffrey, Illinois has gotten things going. So who do you jump, and how do you jump them? And on top of it, are you going to out coach? I mean, you're going to out scheme Tom Izzo? Probably not. Are you going to out scheme Matt Painter? Probably not. So the way you got to kind of formulate it is through culture, yes, that word, and then also through recruiting. I mean, at the end of the day, you're going to have some talent to win in this league. So it's the lifeblood of the program. There are 4 high schoolers, right? 3 signed and 4 committed to this program for the upcoming year when we talk about getting into the summertime. What can you tell us, one, about how recruiting's going? And then once you answer that, we'll get into maybe some specifics with these kids they have signed. But generally, what's your take on how this staff has hit the recruiting trail so far?
So far, it's been strong. Now, it had a little bump in the road with the transfer recruiting in the short window. Like we can't hide from that. Like last spring, so many players left. Asking somebody to fill 7-8 spots with transfers just like that was hard. So that part of it was tough, and you have to include that today because transfer recruiting is so much a part of it. Right. But when it came to the high school recruiting, when they were able to get, when they had time to get to know players, to get after players, they had success. And I know there's people out here that don't care about Minnesota high school basketball. They don't care where the kids are from in Minnesota. But people don't realize it is very hard to recruit high major basketball players to a school when you haven't had success. So if you're going to do that to get good players, you have to start in your areas where it's a pipeline area. Well, what's your pipeline area? The pipeline area is the Twin Cities, which is producing talent at a record rate compared to the past. So you have to recruit your area well. Is every guy on the team need to be from Minnesota? No. But you need to establish a culture to your pipeline area, and they are doing that. They started that by getting Pharrell Payne. At this point, I'm going to tell you, Pharrell Payne is the number 1 prospect in the state of Minnesota. From what we've seen at the start, from the way he's developed the last 2 years, the way he's progressed this year, the way others have not quite as progressed, Pharrell Payne is the number 1 recruit in the state of Minnesota. That's a top 100 guy. He's going to be an impact player. Braden Carrington is one of the top 2 guys for Mr. Basketball. Park Center player, also committed to sign with Minnesota, just like Pharrell Payne. Braden is probably the leader, a slight leader ahead of Eli King 4 that missed the Mr. Basketball Award. His versatility has been good. So you take those 2 names and Joshua Ola Joseph, who's from Osseo but at a prep school in Arizona right now. That's a good start. Now, they didn't get Trey Holloman, who went to Michigan State. So now they have to find another ball handler. You're not going to get everybody, but they're after a good start. The next part of that, the biggest part of that, is establishing with those sophomores and juniors. They have picked out who they want, and those kids have been behind the bench repeatedly this year. Nolan Winter, Trevor Winter's son, and Jack Robeson are trying to set a record for how many games they're attending as guests. It's amazing. They're there all the time. Tayson Chapman has been at 3-4. Bowden Kapke from Holy Family has been at 3-4. And Daniel Freitag, I'm not sure which it is. I'll ask him tonight when I watch him play.
Yes, right.
From Bloomington Jefferson has been at 3-4 games. And these guys were at the fall. And you throw in, Minnesota just had 2 official visitors in Milan Mikovic from Wisconsin and Cam Christie, who is Max Christie's brother. Max plays for Michigan State. They were just on official visits. Both of those guys were also here in the fall. This staff is going after who they want, establishing relationships immediately and building on those relationships.
No doubt.
And you're seeing it.
Yeah, and what feedback do you hear? And you're obviously well connected to the basketball community, the AAU scene, which is so important, and then really I think in Minnesota the high school coaches as well, because certainly in some programs they may have some say in helping guide a kid to where he may or may not want to go. I'm not saying a coach is dictating, hey, you can't go here, you got to go there, but certainly they may have some thoughts and offer some input and say, hey, this is this, and I know this about this guy. What is the feedback you're getting from the AAU and high school coaches?
Well, the high school coaches are all in. They're excited with the fact that Ben Johnson and Dave Thorson had made a great effort to get out to so many schools. They went and watched players at open gyms last fall that probably aren't even going to have players for them the next 3-4 years, but they established that relationship and they got there early just in case one of those players who might be a D2 kid all of a sudden blossoms into a high major kid out of nowhere, because that does happen. Again, Pharrell Payne 2 years ago, nobody knew who he was because he was playing B squad.
Right.
So they're establishing relationships with players and coaches. The high school stuff is good. AAU, I think you still need a little bit more time. It's a little bit more of a different community. Some of the AAU guys get a little bit more perturbed when they don't show quite as much love, but you got to have that relationship there. And the thing about AAU basketball in Minnesota is we have so many good programs that most of them are, good people. Most of them are respected, and you have those relationships. It's at one point it was just, well, are they coming from D1 Minnesota or Howard Poly? Well, that's changed. Look at your roster right now. Minnesota Gophers have 2 players from the Minnesota Heat. They have Pharrell Payne coming in from Minnesota Select. So you got to have relationships with all of these teams across the board, and they're doing that. But with AU, it takes a little bit more time.
Well, and you mentioned the importance of local recruiting, and I am all in on the idea that is what it's going to take at a place like Minnesota to fight out of where you've been for 20 years, an occasional 4th seed in the Big Ten tournament, and everything else is mediocre or below, to get into where you want to be. Make a run at a title, play important games in late February and March, all that stuff. To me, the equalizer, as you said, is the local talent is been at a record-setting pace. And let's face it here, I don't care how good you are, short of John Calipari, you're not going to go into Chicago and out-recruit Illinois and Michigan State, maybe even Wisconsin. Maybe you get a kid there, but you're probably beating out DePaul. You're not beating out a top 10 team. You're not going to Cleveland or Dallas. Here's the thing. Minnesota, you have one thing that nobody else has with a kid from Minnesota, and that is your mom and dad can jump in the car and drive 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 18 minutes and watch you play. You can play for your home state. Michigan State, when they come in, they can't offer that. Mom and dad got to get on a flight. Our buddy Darryl Thompson, that guy's always gone. You know why? Because he's watching his kid play all over the Big Ten because he's not here. Race Thompson, great family, awesome. And I'm not taking a shot. I love that family, and I think Indiana basketball, this is my favorite place to go visit. So I don't blame him at all for going there. The point is, Darryl's always on a flight somewhere. Yeah. If I'm Ben Johnson, I'm telling these guys, hey, look, your mom and dad can come and watch every home game Your friends can come. Your girlfriend doesn't have to, worry about trying to jump in a car and drive to, Iowa City. I mean, on those games you can, but if he goes to Iowa, you got to drive to Iowa every week. If you're going to, and God, that Madison trip in a car is the worst 4-hour stretch of road in the history of the world.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's brutal.
Fix your roads, Matt, Wisconsin, my lord.
It's the only 4-hour trip that feels like 8. It's unbelievable. We talk about that a lot, but it's nuts. Anyway, my point is, that's why local recruiting is important. It's not because we think Minnesota kids are the greatest and they're going to be better than everybody else. It's the only thing you've got as a program that nobody else has that you can sell. You can stay home and play for Minnesota, your home state team, and that has not been, frankly, probably carved into the region enough. And now, hopefully, with this new group, that is part of what the sell is.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to get all, and not all of them are going to fit for Minnesota.
Correct.
That has to be clear. And this staff has done a nice job of getting into some areas and finding guys before other, like, one of the big topics on our message board is this staff has been the first or second to offer some players that all of a sudden exploded.
Correct.
Kai Ziegler at Tennessee, Minnesota was ahead of the game on that kid, and now everybody in the SEC wishes they had him. Jaden Pierre was going to Providence, fantastic talent, but he wanted to stay a little bit closer to home. There's a name escaping me of a top 100 kid. I wish I could remember. He's a 6'7" guy. He's staying out east. The Gophers were the first to offer, and those are big things. Jaden Henley, I'm hearing that this is a young man that Marcus Jenkins found out in California that's coming here. I'm hearing amazing things about how talented he was, but nobody knew who he was because California didn't have high school basketball for the better part of almost 2 years, and they didn't get to play AAU last year because their high school season was last spring.
Right.
So they have been able to dig in. Trent Pierce from Oklahoma that was just here, finding guys like that. So they have also done a good job in developing relationships outside the area, because you do have to recruit outside the area. But again, like you said, mom and dad, it's people want to be comfortable, and comfortable is home by mom and dad. And the amount of people that wanted to stay home but didn't in the last 10 years, it's too big of a number. Of course, some people want to go out and experience life, but there are more that wanted to stay home that did, and that's something that they need to change.
Yeah, and like you say, you're not going to get them all, and you might not want them all. Might not be a fit in certain kids. And I know even in this staff has allowed maybe some local kids that had some interest say, it's probably not a fit, and just kind of let them go by the wayside and sign elsewhere. So that all has to be there. But if you can grab 2 or 3 of the top 4 or 5 year in and year out, you're gonna be a better team than what you've been, right? I mean, it's that simple.
Yes, and that's what they've done so far. And then if you look back, when we've had new coaching staffs, they were able to do that at first. Tubby Smith did it at first, if you remember Royce White and Rodney Williams and Trevor Walkley. Dan Munson did it at first with Rick Rickard, Jerry Holman, Maurice Hargrove. And they did it at first, but it wasn't maintained. It wasn't.
Got to keep that momentum, right?
Yes, and that's what needs to. I mean, even Richard Pitino. Jarvis, he got Jarvis Johnson 2015 and 2016. You got Amir Coffey and Michael Hurt, followed by Gabe Kalshner and Daniel Arturo. But that was between way too many misses in 2017, 2019, and 2020 when there were 22 to 23 high major players that got away.
Yeah, and that Richard also just had some horrible luck throughout. So I mean, Jarvis Johnson, who knows how that changes the program, because they were maybe a point guard away from at one point being a really, really good team. So there was some rough luck along the way with him as well. All right, so now you mentioned a few of the prospects that they're looking at now. Take us through the next 2 or 3 years. You mentioned the 10th graders are getting looked at. I suppose there's freshmen getting watched. Are there some names you can throw our way that if you're a diehard fan, you might want to keep an eye on here in March for high school basketball?
I would, when it comes to the junior class, Nolan Winter, like we talked about, he's at Lakeville North. They're a contender down there in Class 4A, 1A. So keep an eye on Nolan Winter, Lakeville North, who's having a good year. Keep an eye on Tayson Chapman at Totino Grace. He's a top 30 kid in the country as a guard. His skills are incredible. So keep an eye there. So it's Totino Grace, Lakeville North, and also Holy Family. Bowden Kapke is putting up massive numbers. The last time I watched him play, he had 33 and 18. and it's like an average day for him. He's a 6'10" big who can face up and play with his back to his basket. He's got like 5 or 6 high major offers already. Those are the 3 key ones I would continue to watch, and I'll re-say that again. Bowden Kapke, Holy Family, Tayson Chapman, Totino Grace, and Nolan Winter of Lakeville North. I would say those are the 3 key. Maybe Jack Janicki from White Bear Lake. He has a Wake Forest offer. Maybe he enters the picture later. And then moving to the sophomores, the 2 names are Jack Robeson, who plays with Nolan Winter at Lakeville North, and Daniel Freitag, that is from Bloomington Jefferson. He's actually tonight, they're in a conference fight in the Metro West. I'm going to watch him play tonight against Orono as they try to hold on to that lead. Jefferson, they're in quite the difficult section for 4A basketball. They're in that same section with Minnetonka and Eden Prairie and all that crew. So if you want to see Daniel, I'd suggest to get it early in the playoffs, just because it's going to be an uphill battle, although they're having a great year. The most difficult section. The section balance in the Minnesota is absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense why we have these sections when everyone's right in the Metro for the most part anyway. But anyway, that's a sidebar piece. But yeah, the sophomores to watch: Daniel Freitag from Bloomington Jefferson and Jack Robeson, Lakeville North. I would keep it at that for now. I don't know that we've had any freshmen pop up yet and say, hey, I'm the guy. I mean, there are a few. I think Jalen Wilson at Benilde St. Margaret's has a chance to be special. But I think we're a little bit of ways away from knowing who those freshmen are yet.
Let me ask you about transfer portal situation. What are needs that you think the coaching staff will address this offseason from a transfer portal?
You got to have guards. I mean, they're going to need veteran ball handlers. I wouldn't be surprised if I'm going to say the starting point guard next year, or the main ball handler, I should say, will be a transfer. It's very possible that the 2 main ball handlers will be transfers. They're probably going to need a transfer wing as well. I'm going to say there's going to be 3 veterans on this team next year who are guards. Some handling, some off the ball. Do they need to add a big? Maybe in the post. Maybe they need to add a veteran big in the Charlie Daniels style. Maybe not. Maybe in that way to have more depth, possibly. But then you'll have Pharrell Payne, you'll have Trayton Thompson, you'll have Parker Fox, who can do some of that as well in the Eric Curry mold. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go somebody in the front court and then 3 guards. If they go for 4, they're going to take 3 transfers. that. Possibly could be 4.
All right, last couple quick ones here for Ryan James, National Recruiting Analyst for Prep Hoops and Gopher Illustrated Publisher. Big Ten right now as we speak. How many teams do you think make the NCAA tournament? I think Joe Lunardi had 9. He had Indiana and Rutgers both in over the weekend. Now, I don't know how that has changed because Rutgers lost to Wisconsin. But what do you think? I mean, this is a pretty good Big Ten group of teams right now.
I say 8 with a worry on Indiana. Indiana, like in preparation for the game, I went through some game film, and then I talked to Jeff Rabjohns from Indiana, who does a fabulous job covering Indiana basketball. And they just have been so inconsistent this month. They need a big week. They have to have a big week, and they need a good tournament. They are on that bubble. So I would say 8, because I think Rutgers is going to be in. I think highly of Rutgers. With Indiana on that bubble.
And Indiana and Rutgers play this week, so that could be an elimination game.
There you go.
So, and then Indiana has Purdue. And then Michigan is kind of a bubble that seemingly most people have in, but, boy, they've been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of a team too.
They sure have. And those, I did the Big Ten ballot this morning for all Big Ten and I just doing all the reviews, and I'm just like, I mean, the talent Michigan has that just hasn't come together. They're going to get places just off their talent, but they don't play good enough team basketball to make too big of a run. But I think they're going to make it because they do have just enough of a resume. They do have just enough talent to get enough more wins.
Is this the year that a Big Ten team can win it all? It's been since Tom Izzo won it in the early 2000s. Top-ranked team right now in net rankings is Purdue, but it's 11. There's not one Big Ten team in the top 10 of the net rankings.
I want to say yes, because and this is so wide open that it's one of those situations where Minnesota's going to have as many balls in the if you think about it like a bingo thing, we're going to have more balls in the hopper than anybody else. But I just don't. I'm just not confident enough that they're going to pull it through. I look at Purdue. I think Purdue has to be the unicorn, and I just don't know that they're going to be able to. I just don't know that they're going to be able to run with some of these teams when it comes, when we get there into that second weekend, at the end of the second weekend. I know Minnesota people don't want to hear this. They don't want to hear this words come out of my mouth right now. But Wisconsin has the coach of the year. They have the player of the year, and they probably have two guys who are going to be first or second all Big Ten. And that's, can they be the team? I don't know that Wisconsin quite has the depth to make that run. But you got to look at Wisconsin. And then Illinois, I think Illinois has Elite Eight talent. I just don't know that they can get it done either. That's my group. That's who I think has the chance to wave the flag for this conference. I think we're going to be all proud and mighty when it comes to Elite Eight weekend, and I think we're going to be like, doo, doo, doo.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the Sweet 16. I thought last year was the year, and then the Big Ten laid the biggest egg maybe in the history of the tournament from a conference standpoint. They had the seedings lined up. I thought Iowa had kind of a bum matchup. Oregon was way better than the seed because they finally got people healthy. That was a tough one. But other than that, the Big Ten had it laid out there, and they just laid the Big Eight. And speaking of Iowa, that team's an interesting one because if Connor McCaffrey and Tony Perkins play the way they have the last 2 weeks, that team with Keegan Murray, and those two Murray brothers are both future NBAers maybe. I'm not saying they'll win at all. I don't think that. But no surprise if they'd make it. And I don't think they've been to the Sweet 16 since maybe the late 90s. So, I think that I wouldn't be stunned if that team made it to the Sweet 16 anyway, I don't think. But, it all depends on a draw, right?
Yep. I mean, Keegan, the other guy for player of the year is Keegan Murray.
Yeah.
It's a Keegan Murray, Johnny Davis race. Someone will say Kofi Cockburn, but I don't think so. I think it's a Davis Murray race for Big Ten player of the year and for first team All-American. Probably our first team All-American, I'd say.
No question. Awesome, man. Ryan, great work. We appreciate it. How can people read your stuff?
Oh, the best way these days is just go to Twitter, Ryan James MN, and then you can find everything linked there. I mean, I'll be having 4 articles out sometime today. I already put one out, and the other one's in the hopper over here. So easy, and the websites are prephoops.com and gopherillustrated.com.
Awesome. You're the man. Always great insight. We appreciate it. My thanks to Ryan James for joining me on the Go Gopher podcast. Ryan's the national recruiting analyst for Prep Hoops and Gopher Illustrated publisher. And again, our thanks to our presenting sponsor, Sunbelt Business Advisors and True North Mergers and Acquisitions. If you're buying or selling a business, visit sunbeltminnesota.com or tnma.com. The Go Gopher podcast is also sponsored by State Farm agent Tony Hoagland. Again, I'd invite you to listen to past podcasts, and please be sure to subscribe to the Go Gopher podcast right now. It's absolutely free to listen. We'll talk again next week.